G'day folks. Well, over the years we have filmed hundreds of incredibly talented people across the world. Many of these artists have gone on to produce their own videos as well. We hope you enjoy this great lesson from one of our Colour in Your Life artists.
Welcome to part 2 of my painting of an oil landscape, well, with a man in a boat. So it's a narrative painting. Just reminding you, this is part 2 of a 3-part series, a special I've made for Graham Stevenson's Put Some Colour in Your Life channel. For this one, I'll be doing voiceover for part of the video, and the reason I switched to that is because I have to fast forward the footage and I'd be talking like a squirrel if I didn't. So don't worry, I'll make sure you get all the info as we go. I've tried to get in as many angles as I could, just filming on my own. I had 2 bonus filming relatives here for the first part, which made it really special. Okay, let's get cracking on part 2, and don't forget part 3 is still coming. What I'm doing here is I'm creating the mirror image of what's on the top. So the way I tend to do this is I, right from the very start, do that mirroring, even if it's, in the loose paint. And it just keeps the sort of same equal, looseness as you've got on the top. So as above, it is below, as that old saying goes. Just going into that goldy colour because that's the colour of the landscape. So I'm putting that down into the water area. And making sure I've got some nice dark olive green, using a little bit of ultramarine blue in that to really darken it up. And, map in the main shapes, because it's like the landmarks. It doesn't have to be perfect. It certainly would be a waste of time now to get all detailed. So just blocking in big areas of this is just the value blocking, if you like. And I'm thinking about the sky, which I've made out of the phthalo blue and the white, to actually bring a similar value down into the water. And I've actually added in a little bit of phthalo green into that, which was, I'm not sure that I wanted to stay with that, but you can see it's really bright. There's my dogs. Of course, they're always on hand. But the really bright blue in the water, which is the idea is reflecting from the sky. Unfortunately, it was such a sunny afternoon that the painting's a little bit bleached out, but you get the idea. Keeping it loose, see? And all that loose brushwork is what makes it look more like water. And don't forget, I've got that underpainting there, and the brush marks and the, as you can see, the drips and things like that, they also go towards making up that watery sort of mess that water is when you paint it. It's not unless it's a perfectly still day, it'll be it'll usually have some ripples and shapes in it. And I'm reinforcing those darks. So I'm really pushing them hard, making them very exaggerated, just scooping it out a little bit, because getting these really strong values down now is key. Still using that really big brush. That's a number 12. Now I'm thinking about that tree, and I want to put in a bit of shadow, so a bit of ultramarine blue in there. I'm just saying, well, the sun's coming from somewhere. This may not be perfect, but it's not exactly a realistic landscape. So, I'm imagining that there's shadows sort of underneath and in various parts of the tree. And again, echo the same business down in the water. Just do it. It's all part of the composition. Keeping it very loose. I've only sped this up about, less than 1.5, so you can actually still get a pretty good idea of what I'm doing. Now diving into that white, notice I touched a little bit into the golden yellow, and that just puts a bit of spring into that white. And just very simple brush strokes, just one swoop, using the brush to do a little bit of blending as I go. My loose camera girl, Cass, she's using a gimbal and it's a bit wobbly, but you get the live action, so it was pretty good when I had her there. So see, I'm just blending, I'm just joining in with the darker shades. And that tree sort of goes into the cloud, which is a bit sort of odd, but I probably wouldn't do that again if I did that composition again. So now I'm wiping out, because also you can just keep doing that and it just helps out by pulling colour out of the way. That's my barn. I think I accidentally painted it green. And again, look at me, I'm reinforcing that dark green yet again, olive green with a bit of ultramarine blue, whatever makes it really dark. Just want to get that drama into that area right there. Because remember, all this paint is still soaking wet, so I can use that to my advantage, and I'll talk about that quite a bit as we go. It can get to be a bit of a nuisance at a certain point. I'm using quite thick and dark tones there to just get more drama into those little banks of trees. Really just very loose brushwork at this point, as you can see. A bit of a line in where the water meets the boat. This is just a really rough stab at the flesh in the guy's face, my little boatman. I've just got a bit of, I think it was raw sienna and alizarin crimson, and I've put a bit of trans red oxide in there to just create a bit of a shadow. A very simple form, not going for detail here, just getting the essence of man. Even his, his mitt is just a big blob. I decided to use that same colour from the sky in his shirt. It just seemed to feel like it created a harmony in the work, that I didn't go to a different colour, because I'm going to be using a very bright colour in the boat. So I didn't really want to compete. I wanted to have harmony. So there we've got the blue in the sky, the water, and in his shirt. Just painting, just getting that straight white onto my little doggy boy, and again coming back in with a little bit of ultramarine and alizarin crimson for a shadow. Looks a bit like a funny little horse at the moment. And I'm wiping out in the water the shape. So just wiping back, you see what I mean? So don't fuss, you can wipe out. You don't have to worry about getting everything perfect. And in fact, if you do, it doesn't look expressive, it just looks contrived. And even I still make that error of making a painting look contrived. I would really rather just stay loose the whole way. Into the white again, and I want to make the same reflection in the water as, what is in the boat. Now, I'm deciding here that I might use this super complementary colour. That most of this green water, the opposite of that is red, and that would make a really startling effect. So I'm just working that out. I'm saying, yep, I'm going to go for the bright colour. I use my colour wheel all the time. So that's actually alizarin crimson in the bottom for the shadowy area. And look, have a look at that. See that colour underneath? That's the yellow oxide. And it just brings texture that you wouldn't otherwise have if you were just working into a white canvas. It's just amazing how much it can really push you forward. And going into the stark cadmium red there, and really bang, look at that, it's just coming alive. Just remember to wash your hands when you're using the cadmiums, and don't put your hands near your eyes or mouth. I'm putting a bit more of that, that was the Australian red gold, into the red to make it even more, bright chroma. I love it. Just love that red boat. That just made such a difference. And again, keeping it loose in the water so that it looks more like a reflection. See, I'm just working across the canvas now. Everything's pretty loose. Another big blob on his hand. Oh, see, now there you go. That's what you do. You throw that pink everywhere, because I had it on the brush. Now up in here, I decided to go back into my clouds and really put some almost neat white paint onto the tops. I think I might have dipped into a little bit of yellow as well, just a tiny bit. It's better to do that yellow, as I mentioned earlier, when the paint's dry. As I also mentioned, the Payne's grey that we put in is quite inferior, so it's not hard to blend it out. The colours are a little bit funny here because we had big windows with bright light coming in, and that bleached out that camera a little bit, but you get the idea. There, that's a better indication of the colour that was really happening there. Again, just dancing across it. You can just go into so much detail with clouds. I kept them very, very simple because I wanted to get this workshop done. And, you know, you really can go to town on them. I've got a whole workshop on just these cumulus clouds, which is on my website. I think I might have it on Skillshare as well. Just head over to my website and you'll find all my workshops, and just send me an email through my website if you have any questions. But you can really have fun with clouds. This is just one type of cloud, of course, the cumulus clouds, my favourite. They're the most dramatic, a bit like me. And of course, you know, there's that thing where you know that the clouds are not just one big fluff ball. They're a different series of them. Those are a little bit, you know, sort of like big blobs, but if I had a bit more time, I would have actually just, you know, smoothed them out a little bit more and made them a little more subtle. With cumulus, the further they go as they go into the distance, they get flatter and smaller. And once again, if I had a little more time, I'd probably spend a little bit more time on those in the sky, because your clouds are, again, like the water. They're a compositional element, and you can really use them even as a main feature of your painting, of course, as you would know, and they're quite worthy of that. So now what I'm doing is I'm actually coming back in and I'm hitting the underside, so I'm banging into the dark Payne's grey and just sort of allowing that to sort of meet instead of, you know, and not blending in too much, just touching it, just kissing it. Oh, whoops, I put too much white on there. And I'm still sticking with those tones that I made earlier as the sky was grading down. And there's a little fluff, just a little bit of fluff, and that really makes it much more natural. I could have spent a bit more time with fluff. And just, again, remember, I only used one colour in the sky, which was the phthalo blue, which makes it so much easier when you're actually remixing your colours. You don't have to worry too much. Phthalo blue is a great warm, it's just a lovely warm blue. Now, palette knife into some straight olive green, probably got a little bit of liquid on that. And the idea here is to just get some very dark tones into the foliage. Switched over to the brush now to rough it up a little bit, using the side of my brush mostly to scumble it around. And look, these aren't the most perfect trees, but can you see the yellow shining through? Let's put some little sparkles in. Looks great. These are very rough, but gum trees are rough. Have you ever tried to, you know, do a whistle out of them? Now just using a bit of the red gold to add in another tone and lighten it up a little bit. In my oil painting workshop, my big one, we go into this a lot more in depth, and we use a palette knife really, in lots of fun ways to get very gorgeous, dramatic, luscious tree foliage. But for now, I'm doing the very quick version where I'm just stopping it on and doing a few scratchings and playing around just to give you a bit of an idea. The tree foliage is a bit like clouds. You can get right in and, you know, paint every single leaf or whatever, but oh boy, good luck with that. Not for me, thanks. Again, just reinforcing those white. And you can see, even though this is sped up a little bit, I am being very quick. And see that brush? Look at that, a fine line I can make with a great big, that's a definer, and it's a filbert, and you can get a beautiful edge on them as well as putting a big swag of colour on like I'm doing right there. So again, as above, below, and I'm just throwing big loose strokes into the water. That's the way to go. Putting a little bit of that sienna-y colour in there, as gum trees have all that, you know, different colours. They're so beautiful. I love ghost gums, there's so many types of gum trees, but ghost gums, of course, are my favourite. They're so dramatic. They remind me of the white dog. And then coming back now, see, that just blends it. It's still all soaking wet, but just by coming in without too much paint on the brush, boom, there you go, all done, finished. Good enough. So there's, much more detail. You might go right into those bushes and put shadows underneath the foliage. And if I'm doing a major painting, I tend to do all that. But this is all about showing you how to do it pretty quick. I mean, the full length of this 3-part series is less than an hour and a half. So, this painting is a 92 by 92 centimetres, so it's nearly a metre by metre painting. So it's considered as a largest painting. Right, so just coming back down, as you can see, I was putting a little bit of shadow underneath where the foliage was. It's really very easy, especially when the paint's still wet. But there's also that, as I said, huge advantage of coming back to it when it's actually dry. Right, my palette is looking a bit messy. I'm just gooing into that. I'm dancing around between the colours. That was the ultramarine blue and a red oxide, Australian red oxide. I use Artist Spectrum because I just find the colours are so wonderful. They're pre-mixed colours. And that's probably the colour I use for shadow most. That's actually raw sienna and ultramarine blue. It makes a great shadow. And don't forget to mix it up a little bit. So you'll see that in some places I've got the raw sienna mixed up, and the other places I've just got plain raw sienna. And occasionally I've just whacked on a bit of trans red oxide, and then put a little bit of alizarin crimson in. It all goes to make up a really gorgeous mixture, which is what the ghost gums have. And there I'm just putting in some really dark darks. So look, I've got a bit of everything on there, and that's because I'm making a really dark. I've got no black on my palette, and Payne's Grey is useless because it's so inferior. So I'm mixing the 3 darkest transparent colours I have, which is really fine. And that was olive green, ultramarine blue, and trans red oxide, and it makes a nice, lively black, for the little dead branches or twigs that come out the end of gum trees. Now, I'm sorry that's not a bit more detailed, but you're getting the idea. That's just a little, I think it's a number 4 pointed brush that I'm using there. It's just a watercolour brush. I just find that they're not very expensive. Just make sure it's got a nice point on it. And I prefer to just buy them and throw them away when they're done, because you do wear them out when you use them for oil paint. And like I said, they're very cheap. I don't know, $5 or something. You can even buy the cheap ones as long as they've got a good point. So what I'm doing here is just going back and with the definer, getting back into those distant hills with a little bit of extra reinforcement. And, I could sort of disappear them a little bit more, but that is just a bit of olive green, and because the paint underneath is still wet, it creates a nice blended look, so it's not as severe. So I'm just making sort of some distant trees with a bit of olive green. So even though I'm dipping into straight olive green, by the time I get to the canvas there, the paint underneath is wet. So you can utilise that wet paint to, get that nice look where it's, you get different variations of the paint because of what's already there. Just making a really dark mix again to reinforce that tree line. Let's put some foliage in while I'm there. Usually dance all over the place. That's a little bit of a straight line. I probably wouldn't normally make such a straight line, but, under pressure here. I'd probably sort of, like blend it out a little bit more. It's all very well to be criticising my work here as I'm playing it back and watching myself. Red gold in there, and that really livens up that little bank of shrubbery there. I'm just making a nice sort of little bit more candy colour green with a little bit of white and phthalo green. That livens that up as well. You get to this feeling sometimes when you're in the, well, I don't these days because I kind of know it's going to get there, but it's like, oh my God, where am I going? I'm losing it. I love that part there. It was just where I was sort of scrubbing back with the back of the brush and blending it out to really soften it, sort of like a soft shadow. Again, I wasn't using much paint. I was using what was actually on the canvas. it's a sense of feeling that you get. The more you paint, the more this comes to you, and it's a little bit like, riding a bike. You'll get good at it. Now here I'm a little bit conscious of wanting to have some contrast between the tree form and the background, because I know it was sort of disappearing a little bit. So just adding a little bit of stronger. It's a bit of red gold with white, just one colour with white. And I've muted it down at the back there, as you can see, I think I added a little bit of green or blue into it, and that just muted that down because the saturation decreases as you go into the distance. It usually lightens and decreases the saturation. You can reduce saturation through adding the opposite colour usually, and some white. With the number 4 brush, just a few little suggestions of tree trunks in the distance. You don't need much, just little wiggles and things, and it's good enough. Does the job. Just gives the impression. To get that little fine line, I've dipped the brush into some terps and then a mixture of ultramarine blue, just those dark colours again. Switching over now to my filbert because I want to put a little bit more foliage in. Just again, wanted a little bit more blue in there. Australian foliage, especially gum trees, it's actually quite a grey sort of green. It's a really beautiful, subtle colour. I mean, there's lots of different colours, but I love how they change as leaves do. Because I've got that brush loaded up, it's a really good thing to just keep moving around the canvas and dance all around it all at once, and you'll be surprised that the painting just, comes along. It gets done. I really do think I made a bit of an error there, having that right in front of that cloud, but I'll probably fix that up at some point. And I'm still moving around with the same brush, with the same paint. And believe me, you just, as you go around, you pick up different little tones and bits and pieces. Now I've changed over to this smaller brush because I want the barn to be mapped in. Look, again, the colour it's just nondescript. It's just a darky sort of grey colour that I've mixed by using all those dark colours. And I'm just not quite sure what I'm doing with that barn, so I'm just mapping it out. I'll probably change my mind. Just getting the shape in, the shadows. I think it's a really cute little feature. I like it. It just adds up. See, there you go. There's another little piece of story. When you see a barn or something like that, a little house in the background, it just, it just evokes your imagination to think, wonder what's going on over there. It makes me feel better, so I'm going to stick with it. Just trying to work up a shadow here. Feels a bit weird at this stage, but I know it's going to work out okay. Sometimes I do these things and then I wipe them off and I get all fussy, and I don't need to because it's in the distance. You could, really barely see it. So just trying to loosen myself up here. You might add a bit of light to the top so that I have some definition. I really think this is the most dangerous time when we're doing little things like this, because we do tend to go down the rabbit hole and we forget that you just wouldn't see the detail. So it's just an impression, but become more observant about what that detail is that you see. I know in the shadow I had to do that, and I wanted a sort of a bit of a rusty look in the tin of the shed. And I wanted like a really sort of dark door. At first I thought I'd put a great big one, as you can see here, and then I changed my mind. I thought, no, that looks too stupid. It was too dramatic for the whole composition, but you'll see no, don't want that. So get the rag out, wipe it off. One of the funniest things about being a painter, since I've become doing a lot more editing for these videos, these workshop videos, is that sometimes when I'm painting now, I wish I had an undo button like I do when I'm editing in Final Cut Pro. It's like, oh my God, I have to actually literally do it all again. Or, when I do it with painting, but not with editing. It's wonderful. You just go undo. So there we go. I like that much better. It was just a small door that was needed because it was to do with the proportion. It didn't make sense what I was doing. I'm very happy with that. Yeah, so I think that might wind up this section, and we might move on to the next one where I really come back in and get stuck into just, much more detail. But we've just danced across the whole canvas and it's coming along pretty good, I reckon. Right, that's the end of part 2. So stay tuned for part 3 of this 3-part series where we get in and finish this painting. And I will make sure that you've got all the information for materials and what I've been using in the information below. And don't forget also that I have a number of online workshops that I teach. You'll have to head over to my website to see those, and that is in below as well. I also have a YouTube channel where I do other little demos similar to this, and it would be wonderful to see you over there as well. All right. Let's move on to part 3. And don't forget, in the meantime, make sure every day you put some colour in your life. See you in the next one.